Our final segment here on Offside Sports brought to you by Turtlebox Audio Live. Live free, listen louder. Find their amazing lineup of outdoor Bluetooth speakers. Turtleboxaudio.com. And a big thank you always to Paul Teran, everybody at 84 Lumber in Otay Mesa, California. Gave us the materials for our brand new set. Reach out to Paul for all your building questions and needs at paul.teran@84lumber.com.
Mike, real quick, I know as we have Babe Laufenberg on and we went into the break, you mentioned Roger Staubach.
Yeah.
And I've been lucky enough to be a sports broadcaster for more than 30 years. And Babe, you mentioned Roger, and I've always hated the Dallas Cowboys because my dad raised me to hate the Dallas Cowboys. And just the fact that you mentioned Roger is I had him on a show I was doing one time, and I don't think I've ever been more impressed with a human being more than Roger Staubach, not only as a player, but as the person he was and who he was in retirement, especially towards his teammates and what he did for his teammates. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, Roger, I mean, he's just an amazing person. And we'd probably say that too often about different people, but it's hard to live up to the ideal of who Roger Staubach is,
Yeah.
but he does it. And I always tell people, I mean, especially here, obviously in Dallas, people think he is a saint. And I say, no, he's better than that. Mm-hmm. And the things he does, the humbleness he goes about his life. And I've done a number of Q&As with Roger. And, I'll get asked, I say, hey, we have this event. Will you do a Q&A with Roger? And I always say, yeah, sure. What do you think he's going to ask me? And they said, no, you're the Q. And I say, yeah, I understand when you got Roger Staubach, I'm going to be asking the questions. But
exactly.
You introduce him, and you say, okay, Roger, here's Roger Staubach, Heisman Trophy winner, College Football Hall of Fame, Naval Academy.
Yeah.
Did his tour of duty in Vietnam.
Yep.
Pro football, 2 Super Bowls, Pro Football Hall of Fame, and then went on to sell his multi-billion dollar real estate company. So I turned to Roger. I said, Roger, you ever get tired of accomplishing things? and just very quickly, too, talk about how humble he is. So I'm doing this Q&A with him. And he said, well, it was I was coming off my last year, and he retired because of concussions. But he said, my last year. And he said, I had a decent year. And I said, okay, I stopped him. I said, okay, wait a minute for the audience here. Roger led the NFL in passing in his final year.
You talk about one of the big alums who really loves the school. It's got to be Mark Cuban.
Yeah, but the funny thing is, so we both graduated from the Kelley School of Business at Indiana. Mm-hmm. I would say our business careers took different paths after that. But he owned a bar. This is, these are the entrepreneurial guys that end up doing what the Mark Cubans of the world do. When he was still a student at Indiana, he owned a bar. It's called the Motley Pub. And I used to go drink beer in this. I didn't know Mark Cuban. And of course, keep in mind, he wasn't Mark Cuban.
Yeah.
Just a guy that owned a bar, but he's how many college students, right, own a bar? So I was like in the reverse NIL deal, right? Now Mark Cuban is paying these athletes there to play for Indiana. I was paying Mark Cuban. I was putting money in his pocket back.
Yeah, you were.
Which I kind of want to get to him and say, hey, Mark, I bet you I went through $200-$300 in your place. You think you could just give a little bit of that back to me?
In a roundabout way, you're helping finance the NIL at Indiana via a young Mark Cuban. Allison, Babe, your late son Luke has really his foundation and what you are doing in his honor. Allison, talk about how this has blossomed into something that's just magnificent and beautiful.
Yeah, well, we know that you lost your darling son Luke in 2019 at the age of 21 to a terrible cancer, and we know that he had a special relationship with Myles Garrett through college football and your family as well. And can you just talk about their relationship, Luke and Myles, and how that evolved into this year's NFL My Cause, My Cleats initiative that Myles Garrett honored your Luke, and where that money goes and what it supports in Luke's memory?
Yeah, thank you. And it's interesting because I honestly didn't realize just how special the relationship was until, I kind of heard from Myles, down the road. And he was apprehensive about using Luke for the My Cause, My Cleats game that Cleveland played. And he didn't know how I'd feel about it. And I said, are you kidding me? I said, I'd be honored. I said, Luke would be honored. And just in talking to his mom, I actually went to the game and sat in a suite with his mom and dad, both great people. There's a reason why Miles is the person he is.
Yeah.
And she told me that, and I didn't even realize it at the time. She said he invited 2 teammates to his draft party, which that was, we saw the picture of Luke and Miles. That was at the draft party where he was obviously taken number 1 in overall in the draft. And I realized, he was. And just Miles talking about Luke and how Luke made an impression on Miles and really got him to change his way of thinking was amazing, because keep in mind, my Luke was a preferred walk-on at A&M. He's a freshman down there. Miles is literally the big man on campus. It was Miles last year, which was his junior year, but then he came out for the draft. So I've been there. We've all been there, right? Where you got a freshman and then you got the big man on campus. He may not know your name. So it was shocking, gratifying, whatever word you want to use to me when Miles, did this interview, and people can find it online if they want. But it was just tremendous. And again, I cannot say enough good things about Miles. Miles has made I know he doesn't want to be known, but he's made a substantial contribution to the Luke Laufenberg Fight Fund, which we support at UTEP, University of Texas, El Paso. It's a nutrition station that we built through some fundraising that we do. And Miles made a tremendous contribution. I'll just leave it at that, to keep that going. And we support it every year. We provide nutrition shakes, for all the athletes there at UTEP. And I hate to say UTEP is not a Power 4, Power 5 school with unlimited funds. So it really goes a long way. And it's something to actually recruit to. It's a pretty cool deal.
Yeah, Babe, you bring up UTEP, and I saw that, I'm forgetting his name, but young man, the first one to wear Luke's number 2. Can you talk about that day? And it was funny, he got to talk about how he blacked out talking to people like Jason Garrett and Troy Aikman on the phone, and how much of an honor it was for him to wear Luke's number. Can you kind of go into that a little bit?
Yeah, so they were going to, we were going to set up a scholarship, and they were going to retire that number 2 at UTEP. The head coach at the time, Dana Dimmel, who was fantastic. And then they decided to give it to a deserving player every year that exemplified the qualities that Luke brought, leadership and hard work and all those things that we talk about, we strive for. And so I have some of my buddies call, Jason Witten, Jason Garrett, Troy Aikman, after they receive it. And I always tell, they don't know this is coming, but I always say, hey, when are you be available? Just keep your phone handy. You're going to see a number you don't recognize. And as a matter of fact, 3 years ago, it was a quarterback. Roger Staubach called him. So anyway, they naturally, your first thought is, I think this is a prank, right? Mm-hmm. Like, okay, Troy Aikman isn't calling me. Roger Staubach isn't calling me. And then eventually they settle into the fact that, but the initial one was a young man by the name of Justin Garrett, actually a Los Angeles kid. And Justin has been tremendous. We still have a relationship to this day, but he was the first number 2. And he was the one that put Laufenberg on the back of his jersey. And that was not, you could have your own name, just wear the number, but he wanted to put Laufenberg. And those 2 actually were teammates. Luke was just there for a short period of time before the cancer came back on him. But I said to Justin, so Justin's a kid from Los Angeles, grew up homeless at times, single mom raised him, every reason in the world to not succeed. And he has been a tremendous success story. He's now coaching at the University of Texas. But I said to Justin, Justin, how did you and Luke become friends? This was after the fact, obviously, after Luke had passed. And he said, well, Mr. Laufenberg, he said, we were always the last 2 in the locker room. We were always getting in extra running, extra lifting. So it was just 2 of us there. And I thought, what a great way to build a relationship, right? And what an exemplary person to wear that number 2 when the guy tells me we were always the last ones to leave, the last ones to work out. So very quickly at our fundraiser, I brought Justin Garrett up to speak, just briefly, kind of impromptu. And I said, Justin, why don't you come up here and say a few words? So he said, the one time he said, I'm sitting there, we're talking to Luke, and the quarterback didn't show up to throw, and Luke was coming home that weekend. And I said, and he said, well, what are you going to do? And Luke said, oh, I'll just have my dad throw with me. And Justin said, I said, who's your dad? Like, how many kids come home and say, oh, Dad will throw to me?
Exactly.
And I told, then when I went up to speak, I just said, hey, I told Luke, this is a bad ball drill.
Yeah.
Every pass isn't going to be perfect, and so I want you to practice that, even though I was actually trying to make them all perfect. I'm 58 years old or whatever, throwing the passes.
Hey, Babe, listen, we can't thank you enough for the time today. Not only talking about what's going on with the Indiana, but more importantly, your story, your late son's story, and how it's brought a lot of joy to so many people. Thank you so much for your time, and I promise we will have you back sooner than later. And for everybody out there as well, thank you for tuning in today. That's going to do it for Offside Sports. We'll see you next time.